it was a nice, refreshing break for you. They say if you're married, as you get older, you start to look like your spouse. You guys start to look the same. My wife and I, we decided to dress the same today. If you look at us, we used to date in high school. We never did that in high school. We never showed up with the same outfits in high school. But the Knoxes did. The Knoxes dressed the same in high school. They did the same outfit. We are finishing out our series for the month of November on Ezra and Nehemiah. And we did this series because for the year we're studying out this concept of home. And the idea that we are trying to create within our faith fellowship, within our faith family here, a home for us all to live for the rest of our lives. A home where people from outside of this family can come in and find a place to live. And honestly, part of our role as Christians is knowing that God one day will make his dwelling among us, and our work in this world is to prepare that place until he comes. Ezra and Nehemiah is a story taking place over between 70 and 90 years about the first exiles coming back home to Jerusalem after the destruction of the temple. And after the destruction of Jerusalem, about 70 years later, according to the prophecies of Jeremiah, the exiles began finding their way home. And we began reading about Zerubbabel, who was the first leader to bring the Israelites home to Jerusalem. He went there, and his job was to rebuild the temple. And that's what that group of first exiles did, that first wave of exiles. They rebuilt the temple. For the last few weeks, we've been studying Ezra and Nehemiah. Them in turn, one was trying to rebuild the education of the law and the covenant and the culture and the worship of God. And Nehemiah, of course, is coming back to try and rebuild the city and rebuild the wall around the city. And that's what we've been looking at. I think it's important to probably understand a little bit the disorientation of coming back to Jerusalem for God's people. You can imagine if you could somehow, I don't know how good your imagination is. My imagination is amazing. I've got a really good imagination. This is why horror movies freak me out, because I can't let that stuff go. That's in my head, you know. Sometimes when I'm in the basement alone, and I've worked there for a while, I'm fine right up until the point I have to go back upstairs. And I don't know what it is, but that journey up the stairs, there's a lot of stuff that goes through your mind as you think about heading up the steps. And so sometimes I sprint up those stairs because I don't know what's behind me. So I've got an amazing imagination. I'm going to ask you to use your imagination for a second and imagine for a second that America was conquered, that we were taken over, and you were taken out of your country. You were taken out of your city, and you were exiled to a different place, a different people, a different country. And that you remained there for 70 years. All right? So you went there and you died in this other country. Your kids were raised there. Your grandkids were raised there. And then at some point, people begin coming back. All right? After 70 years of being abroad, you begin coming back. And here's the thing. You're affected by not being home for 70 years. Actually, what is home to you is not what has traditionally been home. You know, if you were raised somewhere else, regardless of how tightly you tried to hold on to your country, that other place becomes your home. All right? That's what you know. That's all you know. And now you're coming back into what was your ancestral home. And it's destroyed. And it's ruined. And it's unsafe. The people coming back to Jerusalem spent most of their lives as a type of prisoner. All right? They have practiced their religion, and many times, undercover, often hiding it from the place where they were once living. Okay? At times, it became even illegal for them to worship the way that they're called to worship. They could be put to death for worshiping the way that they would want to worship it. You see that in the book of Daniel. But now, coming back, you're free to practice your beliefs. But you also know that the reason why you were conquered, the reason why you were exiled, is because God lifted his protection from you. Because your people stopped practicing faithfully the covenant spirituality that you were called to. And so he punished you by allowing people to come in and conquer you. Now you have to rebuild a faithful culture from scratch. All right? The people who are coming back were kind of all of the same mind. They were like a mission team in many ways. They were thinking to themselves, this time, we're going to build this culture right.
Yeah.
We're going to do this correctly.
Amen.
We will strictly adhere to our covenant with our God. We will not allow our convictions to slide, nor will we allow our neighbors' convictions to slide. And this kind of describes some of the environment that we see in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay? Now, as we saw last week, Nehemiah was an important official within the service to the Persian king. All right? He made a bold move in asking the king to fund his return to Jerusalem to rebuild the city. It was a risky thing to request, as we looked at, but God answered Nehemiah's prayer, and the emperor, instead of punishing Nehemiah, rewarded him and sent him to Jerusalem with supplies to do the work. All right? And here's the thing. Nehemiah is not a prophet. He's not a priest. He's not a king. He's not a warrior. And he's not a general. He was a man in good standing with the people around him and with his God. He was industrious. He was well positioned. He was educated. And he took advantage of all of those opportunities without squandering them away in laziness or in fear or in avarice. He was a man who showed initiative, which will be the focus of how we read the text today. Now, when Nehemiah shows up in Jerusalem, okay, Ezra, which was the first book that we looked at, had already been working in the city for probably anywhere between 10 and 14 years already by the time Nehemiah shows up. Ezra is trying to rebuild the worship in Jerusalem and covenant law and making sure people abide by it. But as he's trying to teach that, the people who are living in the city are harried, are attacked, and are threatened by the people living in the area around Jerusalem. Now, while the whole area used to be filled with Jews, when the Jews were exiled, other people moved in. Some people even stayed behind, but over 70 years they changed. They became something else. And some of them, like I said, used to be Jews, but are not necessarily as faithful as maybe they should be. I think we can even call some of these people proto-Samaritans, all right? There are historians that go, this is kind of the beginning of what the Samaritan culture would one day become. And we start to see the animosity developing between those who would be considered faithful Jews at the time and the people living around them. So Nehemiah sees a need to rebuild a wall to offer those people who are trying to rebuild worship in the city protection. All right? The wall he proposes to build is likely about 2.5 miles long around the inner city of Jerusalem. Nehemiah shows up with letters from the king of Persia with supplies to do this work, and he takes very little time in convincing the inhabitants to drop everything else they're doing to help complete this work of rebuilding a protective wall. They're in a race in many ways. They're trying to get this work done before their enemies have an opportunity to organize and destroy their work. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah. So we open up the Bible to Nehemiah chapter 4, and in verse 7 we read, "But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, and the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs of Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were angry. They plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, 'The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. There's so much rubble we cannot rebuild the wall.' All our enemies said, 'Before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we will kill them and put an end to the work.' Then the Jews who lived near came and told us 10 times over, 'Wherever you turn, they're going to attack you.' Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest parts of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families, with their swords and spears and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, 'Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families. Fight for your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes.'" See, he gave a little Braveheart speech right there. I don't know if you saw that guy. But he put people by families, knowing that if you put people by families, they're going to fight as hard as they can to ensure the safety of their families. Therefore, and then verse 15 it says, "When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, We all returned to the wall, each to our own work. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officials posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there, and our God will fight for us. So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from first light of dawn till the stars came out. You know, it can be hard to organize God's people to do a hope project or to show up for a community service event. It can be hard to convince the church to come to church on time or to come to church at all. All right? Look at what Nehemiah is able to inspire in this group of discouraged people living as exiles in Jerusalem. He convinces them, first of all, to ignore the threats of the world around them. Stop listening to the world around you. Do not be afraid of them. He inspires them to work day and night. He has them work with one hand while carrying a sword in the other to defend their families in case of attack. Finally, he persuades everyone to risk their own homes during an attack by leaving your home and going somewhere else wherever the horn is blown to protect that area of the wall. I mean, it's amazing what he convinces the people to do. This isn't just the impact of Nehemiah's leadership, however. These were amazing families living in this city. The people who chose to come into exile back to Jerusalem are amazing people. These are sacrificial and brave risk takers. Yeah. These are faithful people living in discouraging times. Brave men and brave women who decided to trust God and trust one another in order to see something amazing accomplished. People of daring initiative, taking it upon themselves to do the work that needs to get done. Yeah. I think we need a wall to build in our own community right here. We need something to focus on, something to bend our own collective will and talent towards as well. I believe that most of us do this as individuals. Most of us work hard to be good neighbors, to serve the people living to the left of us, that live to the right of us, that live across the street. We work hard to be good neighbors and serve the people around us, to help build up the communities around our home and the schools around us and the businesses around us, to make our sacrifices, our personal sacrifices, to our God out of the abundance with which he blesses us, those of us who live in such a lavish country. Yet I also think we need something to build together, not just as individuals. We need a point of focus for our faith community as well. I want to do a much better job as the minister here defining that work for us next year, because I believe that we need something to focus on. Yeah. Now, I want to point out specifically about the men in this story. Okay. First of all, we have a security team here in the church, which is amazing. Rick and Barry and some of the guys. I don't know if you guys know it, but we have secret agents among us, and they keep watch of strangers coming in or going out. They protect the kids. They meet on a consistent basis to figure out how to protect the fellowship in the moment of an emergency. I hope we never see that moment, but you know what? I appreciate the people who think about that for us. We all have to have something like that, something that we're doing to help build up the community itself. Because the wall was not just done because of Nehemiah. It was done because of an extraordinary community. Now, as they're building up the wall, Nehemiah notices other things that need to be addressed other than just the work, okay? So, as the exiles are coming back, they're expending their resources to build the city, and it's not easy, it's not going well. At certain points of Haggai and Zechariah, you even say God going, because of the faithlessness that still exists, I have not blessed you with rain and with great harvests yet. And this is why you're suffering. And so the people that are there, man, some of them have run out of money in coming back. And so now they're having to borrow money from the people there who have means. Now here's the thing. As a Jew, according to the covenant, you are supposed to lend without charging usury, without charging interest to the people that are borrowing from you, if they're your brothers and sisters. All right? But those who have means, who are lending money, are charging interest to those who have no money. All right? And now they're getting even further behind their payments. Some of them have had to sell their own family members as indentured servants in order to keep their land. And Nehemiah notices this. And so Nehemiah is about to address this. In Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 6, it says this: "When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and officials. I told them, 'You are charging your own people interest.' So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, 'As far as possible, we have brought back our fellow Jews who were sold to the Gentiles. Now you are willing to sell your own people. You're willing to sell your own people only for them to be sold back to us.' They kept quiet because they could find nothing to say. So I continued, 'What you're doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? And I and my brothers and my men are also lending the people money and grain. But let us stop charging interest. Give back to them immediately their fields, their vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the interest you are charging them. 1% of the money, grain, new wine, and olive oil. We will give it back,' they said, 'and we will not demand anything more of them. We will do as you say.' Then I summoned the priests and made the nobles and the officials take an oath to do what they had promised." You know, Nehemiah was not myopic in his vision. He didn't just see the wall. He was also able to see social needs of the community as well. There were imbalances in the community that needed to be rectified, that were creating sin within the community itself. Now, Nehemiah was a man of passion. We're going to look at that in a little while. So while everyone is risking their lives, everybody, you have some people making money off of this event. Some of the Jews of greater means were profiting off of those with less means. By loaning money, I've explained all this. So Nehemiah responds by telling the nobles, "This is why God punished us in the first place. Because we weren't following covenant law. I come back and I find you guys not following covenant law. This is suicide what you're doing. Secondly, you're selling your own families into slavery. What's wrong with you?" And the people repent. Nehemiah does an extraordinary job with the task in front of him. He does not give in to threats. Hang with me, guys. He doesn't let people quake in fear over gossip and fear-mongering from the world around them. He lives not like a governor he was appointed to be in lavish lifestyle, but just like the simple wall builders he's asking everyone else to be. At one point, there are some liars and false friends that have penetrated this community. All right, so people are seeing what the Jews are doing. People start moving back to the city. Some of them pretend to be friends of the community, but really what they're trying to do is undermine what Nehemiah is trying to do. All right? And at some point, they try and convince Nehemiah, "Hey, there's people targeting you, and if you stay out in the open, they're going to kill you. So you should go to the temple and hide." And I love Nehemiah's response to this in chapter 6, verse 11. He said, "But I said, should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. I realized that God had not sent these men, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him." He's talking about the people who were trying to advise him. "He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and that they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me." So the wall was completed on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. I love that phrase, "Should a man like me run away?" I don't know why, but I like that. He'd rather be beaten and attacked and killed than run away in front of his people. Now, I want to make it clear that this extraordinary story of a 2.5-mile wall being built in 52 days is not because of Nehemiah alone. God answered many prayers. He protected the people. All right? And the people themselves, amazingly, rose to the occasion. All of that are part of the reasons why this wall was built in such a short time. But God did choose Nehemiah specifically. And I think there's characteristics in him that God saw could be used. For that reason, if you guys would allow it, I'd like to address the men for a moment. There is much to be gleaned about a man of God by looking at Nehemiah. All right? Nehemiah was not perfect. Actually, we see that in the story of Nehemiah. He was given over to his anger too easily. That seems likely. He was at times seemingly also violent in his zeal to protect the exiled believers from descending into disobedience and faithlessness. But he's a man to be admired and one we can strive to imitate, as we also live in days that are sometimes remarkably similar to the days he was living in. Our community needs men like Nehemiah right now. I hope the sisters will bear with me for a moment or two. You know, I studied literature as an undergrad, and I love books, and I love to read. Do you know what genre of book right now is the highest selling genre of book? It's not even close. Romance. Romance novels are the highest selling book. As a matter of fact, if you add the second two genres, which is self-help and religion, and then crime and mystery, if you add those two genres, which is the second and third highest selling books, together, it still doesn't equal how many romance novels are sold every single year.
Wow. Come on, Chris.
Romance novels sell $1.5 billion every year.
Oh my God.
You know, now as expected, maybe it's not expected, I expected this, but over 80% of the people to buy romance novels are women. Now, if you happen to be a man and you bought a romance novel, there's nothing, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that, I'm not making a comment on that. I'm just saying, over 80% of the people that buy romance novels are women. It's an unbelievable trend. As a matter of fact, since 2018, twice as many romance novels have been sold now than in 2018. All right, now I don't know what took place from 2018 to 2023. I've got some conjectures, but I'm not going to go into that right now. What I'm saying is that twice as many romance novels are sold now as in 2018. This does not even take into account how many romance novels are borrowed at libraries. All right, it's hard to estimate that, but probably 3 to 4 times as many are borrowed as bought. Okay? Likely in the U.S. alone, over 150 million romance books were read last year. Enough that each grown woman could each read at least one romance novel in the year. So if you're married, statistically speaking, your wife read one last year. Right? I'm not saying she did, I'm just saying statistics. All right? Now, romance novels are known for their ridiculous covers. Just Google romance novel and then look at the images on the covers, okay? They're almost comical in the way that they look, in the way they but here's the thing, it works. It works. They wouldn't make those covers unless they worked. If you look at a moment, just at the look of the covers, okay? You know, don't tell me that women don't care about full heads of hair. Or musculature. Or handsomeness, okay? All right, so, but let's just put that aside. Let's put aside the full heads of hair and the muscles and the handsomeness, if you can, for a second. Let's look what the men on the covers are doing, okay? On the covers of romance novels are detectives, soldiers, firemen, pirates, farmers, construction workers, gentlemen, barbarian warriors, cowboys, and evangelists. On those covers, men ride horses, sail ships, they use swords, they chop wood, they rescue they rescue people, they fight, all right? Whatever, they're novels. They aren't true, obviously, because most women aren't married to dangerous pirates with a sensitive soul. You know who's not on the cover? A man struggling to wake up on time over and over and over again. That guy's not on the cover. The guy playing video games 4 to 8 hours every single day, he's not on the cover of the romance novel. The sensitive man who also can't string a year of work together with a full-time job, he's not on the cover. The guy who spends money needed to pay household bills and online gaming, there isn't one of those guys on the cover of those books. There's a pretty strong narrative out there right now that women don't want a man who is assertive, who is strong, who is a provider, someone willing to fight, someone like Nehemiah. Instead, what is often said is that what society wants, or what a woman wants, is just a man that will simply support her dreams and her ambitions and not get in the way. Someone that is not aggressive, and a man that does not have a bone of violence in him. The popular narrative would say that is the type of man that society and that a woman wants and that a community needs. My point is that this is all some kind of bizarre lie. Because even the most ambitious, strong-willed, and accomplished women aren't watching movies and reading books about weak, submissive men without a sense of masculine pride.
Come on, Chris.
Even those women are reading books about passionate, dangerous pirates that have the ability to listen and show sensitivity when it's called for. Why do women want that? Well, I don't know for sure. That's not really the point. But what I do know is that those are the men the Bible has always sought to make out of boys. They are the men that are raised in a strong faith community. Strong, responsible, courageous, slightly dangerous men who have the ability to listen, to reason, and to change. If you really want to inspire your community, your family, your wife, start figuring out how to become that kind of man.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now that women can smell bravado and peacock-like swagger from a mile away. So I'm not talking about the appearance of a man. I'm not talking about you going out and buying cowboy boots right now. Or growing a 5 o'clock shadow. Or this is not an excuse for you to go get your motorcycle or have some sort of big bad attitude. I mean the reality of strength, not the perception of strength. Men need to engage in their community.
Amen.
They have to lead. They have to live more like Nehemiah did. And again, I'm not talking about you get to be the one that makes the final decision. You putting your foot down. I mean leading by example. Men must engage and lead out of a sense of responsibility and out of an example. A man has to initiate and not live as a passenger in his house or within his community. Nehemiah is a great biblical figure to demonstrate that example. Now next year, we're going to be honing in on the specific subject of masculinity more and more. But now, if you would allow it, I'd also like to say something for the benefit of our beautiful sisters.
Oh, come on now.
In regard to Nehemiah. I hear the complaints about men. That we need more men who are less lazy. That we need men who see needs and initiate meeting them without being asked to do so. Men who are not passive but are passionate. And yet men who are also willing to listen and can be sensitive to the needs of others. And we don't have enough of those types of men in the church. Now I want to demonstrate something that's highly nuanced. All right? It's very easy to take the words I'm about to say and bring them to some extreme that I'm not intending. Okay? I think we can all agree that a man like Nehemiah would be a great addition to our community.
Yeah.
All right? He would. But when you get a Nehemiah, you also get all the aggression, all the fast reaction responses to perceived threats, and you get passion in an imperfect person. And if those parts cannot also be embraced without villainizing them, there will never be more like them. If those parts are immediately castigated and publicly shamed, you will drive strong men away. And Nehemiah was the kind of man sometimes easily given over to anger when trying to redress what is wrong. Nehemiah 13 verse 20 says this, once or twice now he's trying to tell people on the Sabbath you cannot sell. On the Sabbath we rest. We do not work on the Sabbath. Don't open up your businesses. Don't open up your markets. Stop trying to sell stuff on the Sabbath. We're not breaking covenant. So he tells the people this, all right? Verse 20, it says, once or twice the merchants and those who sell all kinds of goods camped outside of Jerusalem. But I warned them, why are you camping in front of the wall? If you do it again, I will lay hands on you. After that, they did not come again to the Sabbath. Nehemiah is threatening violence. He's not saying, if you do this again, we're going to have a fierce debate. If you do this again, I am posting something on social media. He is saying, if you do this again, I will come with other men and we will drag you away. I will lay hands on you. It continues in verse 23. In those days, I also saw Jews who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. They're marrying unfaithful people against their covenant law. Half of the children spoke the language of Ashdod or the language of one of the other peoples, but could not speak Hebrew. I rebuked them. I cursed them. I beat some of their men and pulled out their hair. I forced them to take an oath before God and said, you must not give your daughters in marriage to their sons or take their daughters as wives for your sons or yourselves. Now he's trying to enforce covenant law. Literally enforce it. Yeah. All right. Here's the thing. I'm not saying this is good or bad. All right. The Bible's not even saying whether it's good or bad. It's saying it happened.
That's right.
All right. It's saying it happened. We might actually be seeing here the beginning of Phariseeism in the way that they are trying to force people to follow the law. Okay? The Bible doesn't say that, but it might be the beginnings of what we're seeing, a legalistic adherence to the law rather than a care of the spirit of what God is trying to create. All right? My point is this. If you ask for a man like Nehemiah, you're getting a man like Nehemiah.
That's right.
He is going to do a lot of good, but he's going to be passionate, and he's going to be aggressive, and sometimes he's going to be imperfect. And if we're going to castigate him for being imperfect, you're going to drive that man away. To have men of initiation and will and strength and assertiveness means working with all that comes with it, without shaming him or making him a social pariah. I think Nehemiah likely goes too far in these verses. I don't know, but it seems like it wouldn't be what Jesus did. But before we get too fast in saying that, Jesus made a whip. And went into the temple, not the wall, the temple, and drove people out. I don't know if he hit people with that whip or not. Sometimes I like to imagine he did. All right? He didn't go in there with a lamb, though. He went in there with the whip. All right? The whip was not an idle threat. As a community, I think we have to do more to make our own community a place where men like Nehemiah want to be. And I think it takes great wisdom to build a place where good men can be developed. And I mean that. Good men are developed. We're going to have teenagers in here with all kinds of testosterone going on. All right? And I got four boys. All right? My mom has been here all week. It's been great, but she's kind of seen. It's crazy, all right? Like sometimes you just you can't address everything. Some people, sometimes teenagers they just have to learn through pain, that they inflict upon one another, all right? But we're going to be developing men here, and you know what? They have to be allowed to make mistakes. They have to be allowed to make mistakes of aggression. They have to test their boundaries. They have to be willing to speak out loud without being told that they're a misogynist or a pig or that they're way off. They have to be developed. Am I clear, church? Yes. We need more men like this. But they're going to be developed within community. Now, regardless of those lessons, the book of Nehemiah shows that both men and women, it's important for us to take initiative. We all have talents. We all have things that we know how to do. We're all living in this community, and we're all seeing the needs that need to get met. You have to use, it's your personal responsibility to use what's been given to you and show initiative within the community. We got walls to build, we got temples to build, and we got a city to rebuild. Let's do the work together. Let's do it passionately. Amen. Thank you very much.